Hi, I'm Kenny Joya, and this is part 3 of creating a live drum kit in Reaper. Now we've already gone through and set this up with our kicks, snares, hi-hats, and so on. And if we're happy with this all in one track, we can just leave it be. But in this video, I want to show you how to separate each drum to a separate fader or track so we can process them or mix them a lot more easily. So to get started, let's decide how many outputs we want. We could either separate it by groups or by each sample. And you can set this up any way you prefer. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one for kick, another one for the snares, another one for the hi-hats, a stereo one for the toms, so they're all going to be blended together, and then finally one last one for the cymbals. So now we need to make those tracks. Let's make this smaller and add a new track for our kick, another one for the snare, then a hi-hat, our toms, and finally the cymbals. Let's give it another color, but we'll make it a bit different from the other one so we can see the difference very quickly. Now you're probably wondering, why do we want to keep this track? Well, it's a great place to record on MIDI and send the outputs to these tracks. So let's turn off the audio on this track. Go to the routing and turn off the master pair and send. Now we're not going to hear the audio on this track, but it's still playing. So now we're going to send our audio from this track to these tracks. But we need to do it with each plugin and the pin connector. So let's go back to the effects and we'll start off with the kick. And if we go over here to the pin connector on this plugin, we can see the output is going to 1 and 2. And that'll be good for the kick. So we can leave this alone. But now for the snare, and we have 2 of them, we want to send it to a different output. So let's go to the pin connector on this track and send that to 3 and 4. But as you can see, there's only 2 channels to choose from. But right over here, we can add more. So let's turn it off on 1 and 2 and add it on 3 and 4. And do the same with the other snare, because you want to send it out the same output. Go to the pin connector, turn it off on 1 and 2, and send it to 3 and 4. Let's do the same with the hi-hat. Go to the first one, choose the pin, turn it off on 1 and 2, and create 5 and 6, and add it there. And do the same with the medium hi-hat, 5 and 6, and the open hat, 5 and 6. Then we have the toms. Now we could send these out to separate outputs, but instead we're combining it to a stereo pair. So the high tom will go to 7 and 8, and do the same with the medium tom and the 4 tom, 7 and 8. And then finally, we have our cymbals. The crash will go out 9 and 10, and the same for our ride and the bell ride. So now we need to send from this track to all these tracks. So let's do it one at a time by grabbing the routing and dragging and dropping it to our kick track. And over here, we can see what audio is being sent. Audio 1 and 2 is going to 1 and 2, and we can turn off the MIDI. We don't need to send that. and do the same for our snare. But for the snare, we're going to switch this to 3 and 4, like we set up with the pin connector before. And again, turn off the MIDI and do the same for the hi-hat, except we use 5 and 6 and no MIDI. And then the toms are going to be 7 and 8 and no MIDI. And finally, the cymbals, which is going to be 9 and 10, no MIDI. So if we play our track, we should hear each sound from the individual tracks, like our kick, our snare, and so on. Let's hear it. And it seems to be working. Let's double check our toms. And the cymbal. Perfect. So if we go to the mixer, we could remix the drums. Maybe we want to pan the hi-hat just a bit to the left. And we could process them separately. Maybe we want to compress the snare, go to the effects, choose the compressor. Or add some EQ to the snare. Or the hi-hat. And we can process or mix our drums completely separately from each other. And we're done and happy with this, we could save the whole thing as a track template. Just select all the tracks, right-click, save tracks as track template. Once again, save it in the drums folder, and this time name it Acoustic Live Drums, Multiple Outputs, and save it. And if we want to use this in a new project or an existing one, just right-click over here, insert track from template, go to our drums, and choose it right here. And it all comes back in, ready to be used. Just put this track into record, and we're ready to go. Just like that. With all the outputs and effects we added to the individual tracks, making it a lot easier to mix. So that's pretty much it. That's part 3 of creating a live drum kit in Reaper. I hope you learned something, hope you can use it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.